Be seated. Call your next witness.
State call Dr. Noah Riley.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
You can step this way. Good afternoon.
Hello.
If you would please introduce yourself and spell your name for us.
I'm Dr. Noah Riley, Noahreilly.
Thank you. Doctor, how are you employed?
I'm an associate medical examiner for the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office.
And what is an associate medical examiner for the jurors?
I am a forensic pathologist who is trained to perform autopsies that fall under the state of Florida jurisprudence.
Okay. And how long have you been employed with the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office?
2.5 years.
All right. And prior to employment with the Hillsborough County Medical Examiners, did you work anywhere else as a medical examiner?
I was in training in Houston, Texas.
All right. And so tell me a little bit about that. Well, first of all, what is your specific title with the medical examiner's office?
Associate medical examiner.
Okay. And what are your duties as an associate medical examiner?
I perform autopsies.
Okay. Generally, that's pretty much it. And
Yeah.
yes. What sort of training and education have you had in order to become a medical examiner?
I have a bachelor's of science in microbiology from Arizona State University. I have a doctorate of osteopathic medicine from Western University of Health Sciences. I did an internship year in pathology at the Louisiana State University of New Orleans. I then did three years of anatomical and clinical pathology at the University of Texas at Houston. I followed that up with a 1-year fellowship in cardiovascular pathology, and finally a 1-year fellowship in forensic pathology at the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences.
All right. Now, you mentioned part of your duties as a medical examiner, you can conduct autopsy. Approximately how many autopsies would you say you have conducted in your career?
A little over 750.
Okay. And do you have continuing legal education that you continue to do as you continue your work as a medical examiner?
Yes.
All right. Have you ever testified as an expert?
Yes.
Court? Approximately how many times?
3.
All right. Now, at this point, any questions? Okay, I'm sorry. Now, were you involved in the autopsy of Jayla Bass in this case?
Yes, I was the supervising attending physician.
Okay, explain to the jury what that means as the supervising attending physician.
So we have a fellowship program at the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office where we train physicians that have graduated and are now subspecializing in forensic pathology.
All right. And Judge, if I may have 1 second, just... So as a supervisor, were you present at the time this autopsy was conducted?
Yes.
Who actually did the actual cutting, the autopsy itself?
Dr. Paul McGowan?
All right. But as supervisor, you were present at all times?
Yes.
Where's Dr. McGowan now?
I believe he is in Arkansas
Okay.
teaching.
Okay. So you were present, you observed, were you, as a supervisor, did you make sure that he was doing everything correctly?
Yes, I aided him in, and educated him in the entering exit wounds and other findings.
Okay. And did you review his report?
Yes.
And were you in fact the person who was in charge of approving his report?
Yes.
Okay. Now, explain to the jury how an autopsy generally works.
So an autopsy is a surgical procedure of a dead body. We first start with an external examination where we look at the skin and see if we can see any natural disease or evidence of trauma. After that is documented, we open up the body. and we remove the organs and look for any natural disease and trauma. And as we're doing this procedure, we're also taking samples of blood and other tissues for toxicological analysis. And then after that, we write the report and establish the cause and manner of death.
And do you take photographs along the way as you do these autopsies?
Yes.
And that's just to document for future potential need down the road?
Yes.
All right. When you made your initial examination of Jayla Bass, what were you able to visually observe about the body from your initial reviews and when you first saw her?
She was a 5-year-old child with gunshot wounds to the head.
All right, and it was very clear to you that they were gunshot wounds to her head?
Yes.
And in the course of conducting autopsies, I'm assuming you conducted many autopsies with gunshot wounds?
Yes.
All right. How many gunshot wounds were you able to visually observe when you first were doing the initial observation of her body?
She has 3 gunshot wounds.
Okay. Where were these gunshot wounds located?
One gunshot wound was on the left side of her head. One was just above and in between the eyebrows, and another was just beneath her left eye.
All right. Now, when you are looking at these wounds, do you clean them up?
Yes, with gunshot wounds, we take photographs as is to see if there is any soot that's present on the body that would be washed away once we clean the wounds. Once we document anything like that, we clean the wounds and then take photographs as well.
Okay. And we'll get back to that soot in a moment here. But when you start doing these, do you document each wound as you go through them?
Yes.
Now, of these 3 gunshot wounds, were you able to find exit wounds to any of these gunshot wounds?
Yes, the one in between the eyebrows and the other that was on the left side of the scalp.
Okay, and they each had a corresponding exit wound?
Yes.
And so those are called, or what are those called when the bullet goes into the body and then also exits the body?
A perforating gunshot.
Okay. And one of the wounds, you found the bullet inside the body, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then what is that one called?
That is a penetrating gunshot wound.
All right. Now, how do you label these particular wounds so that we can kind of explain them to the jury about where they were located and how they occurred?
Yeah, so we took pictures. He decided to use letters to designate the wounds, both the entrances and the exits. And then after that, we took those and we put it all together and described them as gunshot A, gunshot wound B, gunshot wound C.
Okay. Let's start with gunshot wound A that he described in here. I have in front of me what's previously been introduced into evidence. It states 23A through J. Gunshot wound A. Where did this gunshot wound enter the body?
The left side of the head.
Okay. And would photographs help you in describing these wounds to the jury?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 23A. Is this in fact the gunshot wound that you just described to the temple of the body of the head?
Yes.
All right. Now this wound at this point in time looks like it's been, like the hair around it has been shaved. Is that accurate?
Yes.
All right. And you would describe this as an entrance wound?
Yes.
All right. Prior to shaving it, is this the appearance of that same wound at that time?
Yes.
All right. And that's how you saw it, because you just indicated you take pictures of the wound before, you shave it, and then after, correct?
Correct.
And this would be before. This is how it looked when you first observed it.
Yes.
All right.
Exhibit number?
I'm sorry, that is exhibit number 23B. Thank you, Your Honor. All right. Going back, we'll go back to 23A now. Was there any evidence, let me go back to 23B. Was there any evidence that this was a close range shot?
No.
Okay. Explain to the jury how you determine when there is a close range shot.
We look for the presence of soot or gunpowder stippling.
Okay. So when a bullet is fired from a gun, what happens to the bullet in the stippling?
So the gun will take a hammer and hit a primer in the casing of the gun in the bullet, and that primer will ignite the gunpowder within the casing. That will cause a expansion of super hot gas that propels the bullet, the actual lead core of the bullet, out of the barrel and out of the muzzle.
Okay. And with that bullet, what else comes out with it?
So all of the gunshot particles, the gunpowder, will either burn or be unburned when they expel out of the gun.
How far, when a gun is fired, would you expect to see soot or stippling on an individual?
It's variable, depending on the handgun and the ammunition used. Some bullets have more gunpowder than another. Say like a Magnum has more gunpowder than a regular bullet. So soot would be seen usually around up to 6 inches, and then it kind of, goes off, and you can't really detect it after like a foot. While gunpowder stippling is the unburned gunpowder that slaps against the skin. That usually you'll start to see around 2 inches, and then upwards to about 2 to 3 feet.
Okay. And you found no soot or stippling on this particular one?
Correct.
So the gun, and would you agree, Doctor, that the gun was most likely more than 2 feet away from this wound?
Yes, or there was some intermediary object that prevented the deposition of soot or the stippling.
Okay, correct. But if there was nothing in the way, the gun would most likely be at least 2 feet away.
At least.
Since there was no stippling.
Yeah.
Okay, so describe this injury to the jury on what this particular bullet did, its path of travel, and if there was a corresponding exit wound.
So it enters the left temporal scalp, just above and in front of the left ear. It then perforates the skull and enters the cranium. It perforates the brain, perforates the skull again, and then exits out the back of her head on the left side.
All right. What was the path of travel of this particular gunshot wound as it entered into her head?
So this was from left to right, front to back, and upward.
So can you kind of show, like, on your head, like, how it would be, like?
So, like that. So left to right.
Okay, and then slightly downward?
Upward.
Or upward, I'm sorry, yes, upward. Now, you can't say what the positioning of her head was when she received this wound. You can just describe that was the path of travel of the wound in relation to her head.
Correct. I can only tell you the direction of the track that the bullet made through the body. I cannot tell you the position of the shooter or the position of, the child in this case.
And you document, or do you document when the exit wound in this particular case?
Yes.
Okay. And would that be, I'm showing you now State's Exhibit 23C, would that be marker B? Would that be where the a bullet exited her head?
Yes.
So there was no projectile recovered with this particular injury?
No.
Was this a fatal wound?
Yes.
Would it have been immediately incapacitating?
Yes.
Meaning she wouldn't have been able to get up and move around after a shot like this?
Possibly, yeah.
Okay. Now, going to gunshot wound B, and I know that that's how you labeled them A, B, and C, correct?
Yeah.
But your actual labels that you have placed on the, as far as for the pictures, don't necessarily correspond to that. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. So I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 23D. Is that in fact the marker that's labeled C, is that in fact gunshot wound B?
Correct. The C is the entry wound for gunshot wound B.
Okay. And describe, if you could, well, first of all, to this wound, was there any evidence of any soot or stippling?
No.
So there was no evidence that this was a close range shot.
Correct.
All right. Describe this wound to the jury.
So this is a entry wound. It's a round, punched out defect with a abrasion on the lower left side of it, with no soot or stippling present.
Okay. Where does it travel within the body?
It travels from left to right, front to back, and upward.
Okay. And where does it go through within inside the body? Does it go through any particular organs or anything like that?
It has a similar pathway as gunshot wound A, where it perforates the skull, perforates the brain, and then exits, but this time it's on the right side of the temporal scalp, so around the ear, the right ear.
So I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 23E. Let's put it this way. Would this be the exit wound to that gunshot wound?
Correct. This is the exit wound for gunshot wound B.
All right. And was this wound, was this a fatal wound?
Yes.
And would it also have been immediately incapacitating?
Yes.
And again, since this is an exit wound, I'm assuming no projectile was recovered from this wound.
Correct.
All right. So we've discussed two of the wounds. Now let's talk about gunshot wound C. Where was the entrance for this wound?
The entrance wound for gunshot wound C is just below her left eye, left cheek.
Okay, and I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 23F. Which one is gunshot wound C?
So in the picture labeled E, that's the entrance of gunshot wound C.
All right. And in fact, in this particular photograph, gunshot wound, or I'm sorry, 23F, we actually can see the other two wounds, correct?
Yes.
All right. But right now we're talking about gunshot wound C, which is labeled E in State's Exhibit 23F, correct?
Yes.
All right. Describe this wound. Well, first of all, was there any evidence of any close range firing?
No.
There was no soot or no stippling located around this wound.
Correct.
All right. Describe this wound to the jury.
It's another classic entry wound, round, punched out defect with a margin of abrasion that you see it's more towards her nose.
What was the direction and path of travel of the bullet in this particular case?
This one goes from left to right, front to back, and downward.
All right. And where does it go through? Does it go through any organs or anything like that?
Yeah, it perforates her left maxillary bone, and then it goes through her mouth, down through her neck, where it perforates the left carotid artery and the left jugular vein. It then perforates the 7th cervical vertebra, so right at the base of her neck, and then perforates the spinal cord at that level, and then embeds in it.
Okay. And again, as with the other wounds, was this a fatal wound?
Yes.
And was this wound as well immediately incapacitating?
Yes.
And when you say it severs the spinal cord, would that have made it impossible for her to move after receiving this wound?
Yeah, she would be paralyzed from the lower neck downwards.
Okay. Now you're not able to tell us the order that these wounds were received, would that be right?
Correct.
And you also can't tell us if her head was moving or any time while she was receiving these particular wounds?
No, I cannot.
All right. And I forget if I asked, but just forgive me if I asked it. Was there any evidence of any soot or stippling on this one?
There was no soot or stippling.
All right, I couldn't remember if I had asked that or not. And was there an exit wound associated with this particular shot?
No, the bullet was recovered within her spinal canal.
All right, and did you Were you present when Dr. McGowan recovered the projectile?
Yes.
All right. Showing you State's Exhibit 23G. Is this in fact the projectile that was recovered from the inside of Jayla Bass?
Yes.
And 23H, this is just another angle of it, correct?
Yes.
I, similarly. And then in 23J, what are we looking at in this particular picture?
These are also fragments of the bullet.
Explain to the jury what fragments, what does that mean?
Basically broken off bits of the bullet core that came off while it was traveling through the body.
Okay, so you recover anything foreign to the body and take it out?
Yeah, we tried to remove all pieces of metal, bullets, that kind of thing from the body.
Do you remember where these fragments were located along the path of travel?
Somewhere in the wound path, I don't recall.
Okay, but it was along the wound path?
Yes.
All right. These projectiles and fragments, when they're recovered from the body, what do you do with them?
We photograph them, we place them into a envelope and secure it with evidence tape, and then put our signature and the date.
And are they eventually given to the sheriff's office?
Yes, they're submitted as evidence.
So in your opinion, doctor, what was the cause of death for Jayla Bass?
Gunshot wounds of the head into the neck with perforation of the skull, brain, and spinal cord.
And what was the manner of death?
Homicide.
Just one moment. I will pass the witness.
All right. Cross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, doctor. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Thank you. Do you have your report with you in case you need to look at it?
I don't, actually. I left it.
Okay. Well, if we need it, we'll give it to you. All right. So you joined the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's Office in July of 22?
Yes.
So fairly soon, or before this case happened in August, correct?
Yes.
I mean, you had been doing a lot of work, though. Did you say Texas prior to that?
Yeah, I was doing my fellowship training in forensic pathology in Houston, Texas.
And you finished your fellowship around June 30th of 2022?
Yes.
All right, so it sounds like you had left Texas, finished all your training, and then joined the ME's office as an associate medical examiner in July of 22.
Yes.
Okay. And you have been licensed in the state of Florida since July of 2022, correct?
At least July. It may have been May.
Sure.
I have to check.
Okay. But just a month or 2 months prior to the autopsy in this case, correct?
Yes.
And you're board certified in your field?
I am board certified in forensic pathology and anatomical pathology.
And you became board certified after this case had taken place, correct?
Ooh. I'd have to look.
That's right. All right. So now, you did not perform the actual autopsy. Dr. McGowan did, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you were kind of doing a supervisory role of Dr. McGowan.
Yes.
All right. During Dr. McGowan doing the autopsy in this case, you did step away from that autopsy to do other things, did you not?
Well, we have other cases going on, but we have a large morgue, and I'm always there and kind of perching over their shoulders when they're doing their work, to teach and, train and all that.
Sure. Okay. So that's a yes then to my question. You did step away from the autopsy to do other things.
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, doctor, were you not doing other autopsies while this autopsy was taking place?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And the autopsy report in this case, that was in fact also authored by Dr. McGowan as well.
Yes.
All right. Tampa General Hospital records or photographs involving Jayla Bass, did you review either one of those items?
No.
Okay. Mr. Terry just asked you about the cause and manner of death. I want to ask you, you indicated that the manner of death was labeled homicide.
Yes.
All right. There's several different, I believe there's 5 different classifications that you can put as manner of death.
Yes.
All right. Now, when you say homicide, you are not making a legal determination, correct?
Correct.
Right. Basically, when you do manner of death, it is a statistical record-keeping factor.
Yeah, it's a way to categorize the circumstances that led to the death.
Right. Statistical record-keeping.
Correct, yeah.
Keep a category, keep a record of it.
Yeah, the state loves the stats.
The state loves stats, right. And basically, for your definition of manner of death, homicide means just death at the hands of another?
Yes, death due to another individual.
Right. Okay. All right, and you cannot tell us, even as you testify here today, who shot Jayla Bass?
Nope.
All right, and you're not going to be rendering, nor can you render any opinion concerning whether a child under the age of 10 could have shot a firearm. You're not here to do that.
No.
Okay. And there was something during the autopsy where there was some issue about whether GSR testing should be done or swabs of Jayla's hand. Did you speak with anybody from the Sheriff's Department concerning that?
No.
Okay. Do you recall anything in your file concerning Detective Holbelman speaking to your office and indicating he didn't want he didn't need any further testing? Do you remember that?
I don't recall.
Okay. All right. So is that possible maybe Dr. McGowan or investigators in your office dealt with that?
Yeah, it's possible.
Okay. All right. Now, as you tell Mr. Terry, the 3 gunshot wounds on Miss Jayla Bass, you're not giving us any sort of sequence.
No, I can't tell you the sequence of the shots.
Just because we label A, B, and C, that is not telling us it's in that sequence.
Yeah, no sequence is implied with, it's just an easy way to, define it.
And you got to label them so we can know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
All right. Let me talk to you a little bit about stippling. You typically see stippling in an intermediate range.
Yeah, that's the definition of an intermediate range of fire.
Okay. Now, you said something, you used the word variable. Stippling depends, whether you see stippling or not, depends on the firearm, the type of firearm, how much gunpowder is in the cartridge of the ammo, to even determine where the range is. So there's several variables involved in that, correct?
Yes.
And I think you might have used these words. I know you use the word variable, but there are numerous factors that would go into when you can see or can't see stippling, such as I said, the firearm, the gunpowder, things like that.
Yes.
Okay. Basically, all you can tell this jury is that there was no evidence of close range firing.
Yes.
Okay. Now, none of those 3 were contact wounds, correct?
Correct.
Right, and is that kind of right up against the head?
A contact?
Yeah, I didn't want to do that.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't want to dismiss it. All right, so contact to the head.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Indeterminate, because you have contact, intermediate, indeterminate, right?
Yes.
Yeah, those are the classifications when you guys determine distance, and do you see stippling and do you see soot? And indeterminate just means you cannot determine based on the wound appearance what the actual distance would be, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, gunshot wound A, would that have been located under Miss Bass's hair on the side of her head?
Yes, it was just at the hairline.
And for you guys to adequately conduct the autopsy, is she shaved there?
Yeah, we basically take photographs of it as is when we first look at the body. And then after those pictures, we then shave so we can really get a good look at the wound.
Right. I think we saw in both positions, did we not today?
Yes.
All right. Now, in terms of the end of the muzzle of the gun, and how far the end of that muzzle may have been to Miss Bass's wound A, you cannot give us any opinion on that, correct?
Not by the appearance of the wound itself.
I want to talk to you about the track of A, and that's going to be the gunshot wound to the left side of her head.
Yes.
Okay. You said it was front to back, left to right. Did you say slightly upward?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't have your report on you. May I show you a copy of your report?
Sure.
In terms of the track. All right. I just have the autopsy. Yeah, okay. All right, so let's see. We are on page 4, where it talks about number A and goes into 5. If you could look at that for me. Tell me what the autopsy report says about the track of wound A, please.
It says that the wound path is directed from front to back, left to right, and slightly downward.
Okay, so do I assume the report's in error, or is your testimony today?
The report is in error. If you look at all the measurements of the entrances and exits, it makes a lot more sense. And we also have photographs of the probes that we use to signal directionality, but I doubt you guys would allow that to be shown.
We didn't show those.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't use those. All right. So wound A, then, the gunshot wound, is in fact slightly upward, not slightly downward, as Dr. McCowan documented in the autopsy report.
Yes, the wound path is slightly upward.
Okay. All right. And in fact, would you agree with me that when you gave your deposition to us, you testified the track was front to back, left to right, and slightly downward? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so you made a mistake in the deposition as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, and I think you've already said you cannot tell us anything about the position of the shooter, only tell us what you saw for that track.
Yeah, just the direction of the track through the body.
Right, okay. And when we do the track through the body, are you doing it in a standard anatomical position?
Yes, where basically the body is facing you with the arms extended and the palms facing towards you.
Like this?
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. All right, and most people aren't in the standard anatomical position, right?
Not typically.
Okay. All right, let's go to B. B is the one that had an entrance and exit wound, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. That's going to be the one near the eyes.
In between
Forehead.
the eyebrows.
Okay.
Yeah. Gunshot wound B.
Okay, B. We're on the same page. All right, what was the track of B?
Left to right, front to back, and upward.
Okay. Did you say slightly upward on your testimony or upward?
I think you mean just now?
Yes, sir.
I said upward.
Okay. Is it slightly or upward, or does it really matter to you?
I mean, it doesn't change my up or down. It doesn't really change my cause and manner of death. So.
Okay. All right. I'm going to show you your report again in terms of gunshot wound B to see what is in Dr. McGowan's autopsy report concerning B. What is the track listed by Dr. McGowan in the medical examiner's official report?
It states that the wound path is directed from front to back, left to right, and slightly downward.
So again, we're going to have another error in the autopsy report.
Correct.
Okay. And thank you. And again, doctor, when we took your deposition, and a deposition for the jury is testimony under oath, and we asked you questions about this, correct?
Correct.
All right. And when you testified in that deposition, would you agree with me, you also testified under oath that it was front to back, left to right, and slightly downward?
Yes.
So that was a mistake, right?
It happens.
All right. All righty. So it looks like, going on your testimony today, A and B have a similar track?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. All right. And then C, that's going to be the wound to the cheek, right?
Yeah, the left cheek.
That's the one that's going to end in the spinal cord.
Correct.
All right. And that is the one in which you were able to recover a projectile and/or fragments, correct?
Yes.
Did you know, or do you know, the caliber of the gun allegedly used in this case? Do you have any information on that?
No.
Okay. So you don't know anything about the gun that was, say, even recovered in this case?
I don't know anything about the gun.
Okay. All right. So when we were talking earlier about stippling and how there's many variables, you can't tell us any of that information, such as how that firearm excretes stippling, or the type of firearm and how that affects stippling, or how much gunpowder's in the cartridge. You can't tell us any of that.
No, I can't tell you anything about the firearm itself.
Okay. All right. Now, C, that is downward, correct?
Yes.
All right. All right, and front to back and left to right.
Yeah.
Okay. Do they all seem to be fairly consistent based on what you're testifying to today?
Yeah, the only difference between A, B, and C was that C was downward.
Okay. Right, and A and B upward.
Yes.
Right, okay. And you're not giving us any opinion on the positioning of where Ms. Bass was?
No.
And you're not giving us any opinion on the positioning of the shooter and/or the firearm?
Yeah, I can.
You can't?
I
Right.
can't tell you the position of either one.
Sorry, just want to make sure I had heard you. All right, now, basically, you are given the body, you conduct your autopsy, you're limited by what you can tell us. You tell us what you see, right?
Correct.
All right, and would you agree with me that people can move around, guns can move around, it can affect?
Yes, people can move around.
Okay. In this case, you didn't see any evidence of any defensive wounds by Ms. Bass, correct?
No.
And any opinion, can you render any opinion about the shots being about all at the same time, or can you give any opinion on that?
I can't tell you which one was first and which one was last.
Okay. All right, and finally, I'm just going to step away and ask counsel real quick, but finally, for my questions, do you remember also when we took your deposition, do you remember me asking you if there were any errors in the report, which we now know there were, and you said no? Do you remember that?
Probably sounds like something I would say, but then there were mistakes, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. May I have a moment? Dr. Riley, thank you so much. We don't have any other questions for you.
Dr. Riley, those two wounds, A and B, that were incorrectly labeled slightly upward and slightly downward, correct? Or they were?
Yeah, they were both. The corrected version is that they were going upward.
Okay. And you know that because you can physically see the entrance wound and where the exit wound is, and you can measure on the body where it is, correct?
Protection leading. Stay.
Is there a way to just determine that just by looking and measuring from the body where the wounds are, the entrance wound and exit wound is?
Yeah, and that's documented in the report.
Okay. So nothing changes from how the wounds occurred, where they went, or the range of the firing?
No.
All right. Does it change your opinion in any way, whether it was slightly upward or slightly downward, as far as what the wounds did, whether they were fatal or whether they were immediately incapacitating, or anything at all to do with the wounds?
No, it just doesn't change my opinion on the cause of death.
Nothing further, Judge.
All right, you can step down, doctor, thank you.
Thank you.
Is he released from his subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Call your next witness.
State will call Mykesha Romeo.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you, ma'am.
Who's that? Who's that? Good afternoon. If you would please introduce yourself and spell your name for us.
My name is Mykesha Romeo, Mykesha Romeo.
All right, and just a reminder to keep your voice up.